Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. This week, coal-to-fuels giant Sasol stepped into the renewable energy space with an announcement that it was pursuing a solar energy project. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the development. Terence, welcome to Second Take. What did Sasol announce, and is it surprising?
Well, if you've looked at Sasol over the last few years, you'll realize they are looking at different or alternative forms of energy. Really, they are an alternative energy and chemicals company in the sense that they take coal and gas and they convert it into petrol, diesel and chemicals. But that is not a very clean process. It's one of the most carbon intensive processes for production of fuel. It is probably the most carbon intensive process for the production of fuel. So they realize that the world is moving towards a carbon constrained world. So I think a few years ago they set up this new energy business that was going to look at different things, different technology solutions that could, create a sustainable business platform for the group in a carbon-constrained world. So they're looking at things like carbon capture and storage, and they're looking at underground coal gasifications that would be classified as clean coal technologies. And then in the renewable energy space, really in the electricity space, they've been doing a global review of the technologies available. They've been looking at thin film solar panels. But I think one of the things that they're really prioritizing is this concentrated solar power. And this week they announced a relationship with a US company called Brightsource Energy, where they would look at doing a study into the potential for a concentrated solar power at a fairly large scale, utility scale. They didn't say how large it would be, but probably over 100 megawatt type plants to bigger, because Brightsource is building bigger plants around the world and putting that up in South Africa. And so it is a new sort of string to their bow. They're really not known for this sort of activity, but I think it's not that surprising if you look at where strategically the business is going.
When can we expect progress on this study?
Well, what they've announced with Brightsource, who's working with Alstom, is that they're going to do a front-end engineering design over the next few months. Now, from what I understand is that detailed engineering design is going to take place, and they're going to have to look at sites, geographical locations. They're going to look at our solar resource map. South Africa's got one of the best solar resource bases in the world. And what Brightsource said is it's across several locations. So we often talk about just the Northern Cape, but they are looking at other locations as well, and they haven't pinpointed one. They're going to look at what scale this plant should be, whether it's feasible, whether they can come in at the costs that South Africa is looking at. South Africa's got a renewable energy procurement program underway at the moment for 3,725 megawatts of renewable power from wind, from solar photovoltaic, solar concentrated power, which is what this technology would be, as well as landfill gas and biogas and mini hydro. And we had the first round in December, and in that first round, actually a lot of the bids related to solar photovoltaic, that's solar PV as people call it, and 2 of the bids related to concentrated solar power, 50 megawatt plant and 100 megawatt plant, and then the rest were wind related. So you can see that PV is sort of gaining a lot of momentum and traction, and in fact a lot of the allocation is directed towards PV, which is a bit more of a mature technology. But Sasol has decided to concentrate, a bit like Eskom, on this concentrated solar power CSP technology. And they've chosen to look at the power tower concept that Brightsource has developed. So there's various CSP technologies, the parabolic trough technology, and then this power tower technology. And what really it is, it's a tower in the middle of an array of mirrors that track the sun and then concentrate that sunlight onto a boiler at the top of this tower and create really high temperatures at high pressure. And then the rest of it's fairly conventional. So that's why Alstom would be involved. The rest of it's almost like a coal-fired power station. You drive a turbine and you produce the electricity. So there's a bit of optimism that this technology can be brought down the cost curve if you've got a good solar resource, because it's much less mature than, say, parabolic trough, as well as PV. PV, which is in a very robust place because the Chinese have jumped in a very big way. And in fact, it's becoming hard for a number of companies outside of that space to compete with the Chinese PV revolution. And there are companies in financial distress. But the technology is fairly well established, which is why a lot of the initial bids for South Africa's renewable energy program were PV related and wind related, which are a bit more mature. But Sasol's a technology company as much as a fuel and chemical producer, and they feel that this is a technology that they would like to be part of and look at whether they can bring down the levelized cost of production in a big way to make it a really competitive and compelling choice for South Africa. At the moment, if you look at the caps on solar CSP at 265 cents a kilowatt hour, it seems almost ridiculous that we're pursuing it when we produce our electricity from coal-fired power stations at less than 38 cents a kilowatt hour. But I think the view is that we're in a carbon-constrained world in the future. We are moving towards possibly a carbon tax. We've already started to integrate renewables in a big way into our future planning, and therefore Sasol and Eskom and everyone else is starting to look at these technologies and hopefully through rolling them out, bring down the cost of production.
What does Brightsource bring to the party, and why are they keen on pursuing opportunities in South Africa? Well,
Brightsource has developed the technology solutions. There's a lot of intellectual property in this. What they do emphasize is that it's an ideal technology to do a lot of local content with, because it involves steel and it involves glass and it involves concrete. You can have high levels of local content, plus the downstream end of it is fairly conventional, and we have some of the local components that are already made for turbines and things like that in South Africa, and boilers that are already being made for the coal-fired power station. So there's a potential to do quite a lot of local content. And apparently in Spain they've moved over a decade from starting at 50% local content to over 80% local content. In the US, where they're deploying some of these large CSP farms, they've got to about a 65% local content. And South Africa is very keen to have high levels of local content so that we can create the so-called green jobs around our renewable energy programs. So not just in building the facilities, but in manufacturing components for the South African projects as well as international projects or African projects that are likely to arise in future. So they're saying that is a possibility. That's a good opportunity to pursue for South Africa. But at the same time, Brightsource is, through its research development, as well as a lot of the projects it's undertaking, it's learnt a lot, and it's got a lot of intellectual property about the way the heliostats track the sun, for instance, the way they're able to match that with the tower and make sure that the steam is of a very high temperature and very high pressure, which helps in the efficiency of the plant. So there's a lot of value add that Brightsource can bring to South Africa, and which we wouldn't have at the moment, so technology transfer. So that's really what they bring. And what Sasol brings is the opportunity, and Alstom as well, the other components of the power plant. So it's a sort of a synergy that they see coming together, and that's why this has emerged. And we're now going to see this front-end engineering design feed, as they call it, that should take place over the next few months and culminate in a final study by the third quarter of this year. So fairly quick, not quick enough to apply for the second bid window, which is going to close in March. So we've had the first 1,000 or so megawatts already divvied out to renewables companies and developers, and they have to reach financial close by June on those projects. But there's still capacity left to be absorbed, so they won't be able to bid in March. But they are looking at maybe to try and get to a point where they can make investments decisions at Sasol board level. These are billions of rands plants. They're not small investments. It's going to involve a lot of capital if they do go ahead. We see the very big plant in the Californian deserts that Brightsource is building is a multi-billion rand type investment. That's a 370 megawatt nameplate capacity plant, and they've got other projects coming up that are even larger than that. So this is a big decision for Sasol. It's out of their comfort zone, and they need to have a fairly well-established study, and that's what that's really what was announced this week that the study will take place this year, to a point where they can either bid into a renewable energy program from the government, or even if they feel that they can bring down the cost to a level that can make sense, or even for their own production. But I think their main target would be to bid into the procurement program at some point.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.